My marriage ended on a Tuesday, though I didn't know it until a stranger slid a heavy envelope across a café table. The air smelled of burnt espresso. He introduced himself as Julian Vance, a man with cold eyes and a tailor who understood power. He didn't offer sympathy. Instead, he dropped a bomb that shattered my reality. I want to divorce my cheating husband, but the husband of the other woman showed up and gave me $100 million, saying, "Don't divorce him just yet. Just wait for 3 more months." The words hung between us like toxic smoke. My instinct was to scream or run. I looked at the envelope, then at his face. He wasn't joking. He wasn't even smiling. My hands gripped the table, knuckles turning white against the wood. I started to stand, desperate to escape the suffocation of his calm demeanor. "You are insane," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I am going home to confront him right now." Julian didn't flinch. He placed a heavy hand over mine, pinning me to my seat. "Sit down, Daisy," he commanded, his voice low and smooth. It wasn't a request. He opened the folder, revealing a spread of photographs. There was Mark. My Mark. He was laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years, his hand resting intimately on the waist of a woman I recognized. Elena, Julian's wife. The pictures were undeniable. They weren't just having an affair, they were building a life. The pain hit my chest like a physical blow, stealing my breath and blurring my vision. I reached for the photos, but he pulled them back. "Emotion is a luxury you cannot afford right now," he said. He tapped a tablet, turning the screen toward me. It displayed a bank transfer authorization, waiting for a single thumbprint. The number was staggering. $100 million. "I have a merger closing in 90 days, he explained, his eyes cold. "If I file for divorce before then, I lose my company. If you file, Elena finds out, and she ruins everything." My mind raced, trying to reconcile the heartbreak with the business proposition. Mark had betrayed me for free. This stranger was paying a fortune for my silence. It felt dirty, transactional, and pragmatic. "You want to buy my dignity," I accused, though the fight was leaving me. Julian shook his head slowly. "No, Daisy. I am buying your patience. I am buying you a future where you don't just survive this, you win." He pushed the tablet closer, the green accept button pulsing. I looked out the window at the rain blurring the streets. I thought of Mark coming home late, the lies, the smell of her perfume on his shirts. Confronting him now would give me 5 minutes of satisfaction. Waiting would give me a lifetime of freedom. I looked back at Julian, my eyes drying. The sobbing victim died in that chair. I pressed my thumb against the glass. 3 months, I said, my voice steady. "But I want to see everything you find." The drive felt like a commute to an undercover assignment. I pulled into the garage, the door's rumble sounding like a curtain rising on a stage. My hands trembled on the wheel, fueled by cold adrenaline. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, searching for cracks. The woman staring back looked composed, but her eyes held a shard of ice. I took a sharp breath and plastered on a smile. The performance began the moment I stepped onto the concrete. The kitchen smelled of garlic and lemon. Mark stood by the stove, stirring sauce with the ease of a man who wasn't destroying his life. "Hey," he said without turning. "How was the city?" The question felt like a trap. Yesterday, I would have hugged him. Today, the thought made my skin crawl. "Fine," I lied, my voice steady. "Just errands." He hummed, oblivious that his wife was now a spy. I watched his back, waiting for guilt to manifest. It never did. We sat at the round table. He poured wine, the liquid swirling in the glass. I watched his hands. Strong hands that had touched another woman hours ago. He placed his phone on the table, screen facing down. It was a gesture I had ignored 1,000 times. Now, it screamed at me. A barrier. "Project is ramping up," he said. "Might be late tomorrow." The lie was smooth, polished by repetition. I nodded, sipping wine to hide the curl of my lip. He reached for the salt, his sleeve brushing my arm. A scent drifted off him. It wasn't his usual musk or the cedar soap I bought him. It was sharper. Citrus and sandalwood. Expensive hotel shampoo. My stomach turned over. He hadn't just cheated, he had washed me off him before coming home. That calculation was chilling. "You smell nice?" I said, testing him. He froze for a microsecond. "New gym soap?" he replied, his eyes darting to his plate. I couldn't sit there anymore. "I have a headache," I murmured, standing. "I am going to take a bath." He looked relieved, eager to text her. "Take your time," he said, reaching for his phone. I walked to the bathroom and locked the door with a loud click. My sanctuary. I sat on the edge of the tub and pulled out my phone. My fingers flew to the banking app. I needed to see it again. I needed to know the money was real. The screen loaded, and there it was. The deposit from the Vance Trust. $100 million. The number was so long it barely fit on the display. It felt like looking at a high score, not actual currency. My breathing slowed. The panic clawing at my throat receded, replaced by cold resolve. Julian wasn't just paying me to wait. He was arming me. I wasn't a victim trapped in a lie anymore. I was an operative with a very specific mission. I darkened the screen and checked my reflection in the vanity mirror. I heard Mark's muffled laughter through the door. Now, I realized something pathetic. He wasn't a master manipulator. He was just bored. He was breaking our vows because he wanted a cheap thrill. Well, I had a thrill now too. I unlocked the door, shoulders back, ready to play my part. For that kind of money, I could be the world's greatest actress for exactly 90 days. 60 days of smiling through clenched teeth had changed me. I met Julian in a sterile co-working space downtown, far from the prying eyes of our social circles. He didn't offer coffee. Instead, he slid a sleek black hard drive across the glass table. The surveillance audit. He stated flatly. I plugged it into my laptop, expecting grainy photos. Instead, I saw a digital map of the city overlaid with red lines. "Your husband isn't just cheating," Julian said. "He is careless." The glowing red lines told a story my heart had refused to read. While I sat at home believing his stories about late client dinners, the GPS data placed him in a residential tower in the West Loop. "The eclipse?" Julian noted, pointing to a cluster of dots. "He enters at 6:15 p.m. and leaves at 9:30 p.m. Like clockwork." It wasn't random passion. It was a schedule. Mark was treating his affair with the same punctuality as his quarterly performance reviews. I needed to see the building. Not on a screen, but with my own eyes. That evening, when Mark texted his usual, "Stuck at the office. Excuse?" I drove to the West Loop. I parked my sedan 3 blocks away, blending into the line of commuter cars. The eclipse rose above the street, a pillar of glass and steel. It looked expensive. Too expensive for a mistress to afford alone. I watched the entrance, shivering slightly despite the car's humming heater. At 6:12 p.m., Mark's silver Audi pulled into the valet lane. I held my breath. He stepped out, tossing the keys to the attendant with a familiarity that stung. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. He looked relaxed, lighter than he ever looked at our house. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look over his shoulder. He walked through the revolving doors like he owned the place. I snapped 3 photos with a telephoto lens, documenting the lie in high definition. I beat him home by 20 minutes. When he walked through the door at 10, smelling of mints and cold air, I was sitting on the couch. "You missed the reservation," I said, the words slipping out before I could check them. It was the anniversary of our first date. A small thing, but one we usually honored. Mark blinked, confusion clouding his face. "Daisy, I told you." The merger meeting ran late. The lie was so lazy it felt like an insult. Rage flared in my chest, hot and demanding. I wanted to scream about the West Loop. I wanted to throw the hard drive at his head. Then, the number flashed in my mind. 100 million. The merger meeting. Julian's deadline. If I screamed now, I was just a scorned wife. If I smiled, I was a wealthy strategist. I forced my muscles to relax, unclenching my fists one finger at a time. "You are right," I said softly. "Work comes first." Mark exhaled, relieved he had dodged a bullet he didn't even know was fired. He kissed my forehead. A hollow gesture, and went upstairs to shower. I stayed downstairs and opened the hidden safe behind the bookshelf. I placed the new memory card inside, beside the printed bank statement. A strange sensation settled over me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was the dark satisfaction of knowing the end of the movie, while he was still watching the beginning. Saturday morning sunlight hit the marble countertop, illuminating the crime scene. Mark had left his phone unlocked next to the coffee maker, screen glowing with a half-composed message. It was a careless mistake born of arrogance. He assumed I was too checked out to notice, or perhaps too stupid to care. I stood over the device, clutching my mug, watching the cursor blink. It would be so easy to read the words he was sending her. But I didn't need to read them to know they were lies. I forced myself to look away. Julian's rules were strict: physical snooping leaves fingerprints, but digital clouds are forever. I picked up the family iPad instead, which sat innocently on the breakfast table. It was synced to our shared photo stream, but Mark had forgotten to disable the recent documents sync. A PDF receipt popped up in the corner. It wasn't for a client dinner or a golf outing. It was a hefty invoice for high-end furniture. I opened the file, my heart hammering a cold rhythm against my ribs. $4,000 for a cloud white sectional sofa scheduled for delivery to the Eclipse Tower. Unit 40B, the breath hissed out of me. He wasn't just sleeping with her, he was nesting. He was using our joint savings to build a parallel life, while telling me we needed to be frugal. The betrayal shifted from emotional to financial in a single heartbeat. I took a screenshot. I met Julian an hour later in the back row of an empty cinema. It was the only place dark enough to hide our faces. I showed him the receipt on my phone. The blue light illuminated his sharp features. "He is siphoning the investment account," Julian whispered, his voice devoid of surprise. "My forensic accountant caught a $10,000 withdrawal yesterday. He is liquefying assets to impress Elena." Julian didn't look angry. He looked like a broker watching a ticker. "Why are we still waiting?" I hissed, the darkness pressing in on us. "He's spending my future." Julian turned to me, his eyes locking onto mine. "Because in exactly 30 days, the merger becomes official. If I file now, the deal implodes. If I wait 4 weeks, the company is secure and she gets nothing." The stakes suddenly snapped into focus. I wasn't just protecting my settlement. I was the guardian of his empire. That night, the house felt like a museum of a dead marriage. Mark sat on the couch, our old, worn couch, complaining about the economy. "The market is brutal right now, Daisy," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "We might need to hold off on that vacation." The audacity was breathtaking. He was pleading poverty while sitting on a secret fortune of stolen domesticity. I nodded sympathetically, slicing my steak. "We can tighten our belts," I said. "I don't mind staying home." He smiled at me, grateful for my malleability. Unaware he was smiling at his executioner. He went back to his phone, typing a message to the woman sitting on his new white sofa. I touched the burner phone in my pocket, feeling the vibration of a message from Julian. 29 days. We were no longer just victims of a sordid affair. We were soldiers in a war, fighting on 2 fronts, connected by a countdown clock that was ticking louder every second. The suitcase appeared on the bed like a threat. Mark was folding shirts with military precision, his back turned to me. "It's just a crisis management seminar in Tampa," he said, his voice too light for the heavy silence in the room. 3 days. Boring stuff. Really. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him pack his best linen suit for a boring seminar. Tampa is lovely this time of year, I said. He didn't turn around. I'll barely see the sun. It's all boardrooms. He was lying to my face. I retreated to the laundry room and pulled out the burner phone. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. My text was short: Tampa. Friday to Sunday. Julian's reply came in seconds, flashing like a red warning light. Flight 402. The Ritz, Carlton. Elena booked the suit under her maiden name. The confirmation hit me hard. It wasn't just a trip, it was a honeymoon. They were flying first class while I clipped coupons. The audacity was almost impressive. I deleted the message. Back in the bedroom. I played the role of the dutiful wife one last time. Let me help with your toiletries. I offered, reaching for his leather kit. He hesitated, then shrugged. Sure. Thanks, babe. I took the bag into the bathroom. My hands moved with practiced speed. I slipped a slim, black GPS tile into the lining behind his shaving cream. It was invisible to the naked eye but loud to my phone. I zipped the bag shut. It wasn't just a DOP kit anymore, it was a beacon. Friday morning was gray and wet. An Uber idled in the driveway, its wipers slapping rhythmically against the glass. Mark checked his watch, impatient to leave his real life behind for the fantasy. Call me if you need anything, he said, leaning in for a kiss. I let his lips brush my cheek, suppressing the violent urge to wipe it off. Have a safe flight, I whispered. Learn a lot. He smiled, that charming, boyish smile that used to melt me. Now, it just looked like a mask. As soon as his taillights vanished around the corner, I drove to Julian's office. It was a glass fortress overlooking the lake, cold and imposing. He was waiting by a massive oak desk, 2 stacks of documents perfectly aligned before him. They just landed, he said, not bothering with a greeting. He tapped a screen showing 2 dots moving in tandem down a Florida highway. The photographer is positioned at the hotel entrance. The surveillance was total. We weren't just watching them, we were directing the scene. The first images arrived an hour later. High-resolution shots of Mark and Elena checking in. His hand was on the small of her back. She was laughing, head thrown back, wearing a white sundress I had never seen. They looked like a couple in love. They looked free. I stared at the screen, expecting to feel jealous. Instead, I felt a cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't a marriage. It was a corpse. And I was finally ready to sign the death certificate. Julian handed me a heavy fountain pen. The filings are drafted, he said. We file Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. They will be served by lunch. I took the pen. It felt like a weapon. What about the surprise? I asked. Julian smirked, a rare expression for him. I arranged for a bottle of vintage champagne to be delivered to their room tonight. I froze. From whom? He capped his own pen. From the management. Let them celebrate. It makes the fall much harder. The morning of the execution was quiet. Dangerously so. I sat in my kitchen, coffee steaming on the granite. My phone lay on the table like a detonator. It was Tuesday. Exactly 90 days since Julian had bought my patience. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, charged with the static of an approaching storm. I watched the microwave clock flip from 8:58 to 8:59, 1 minute remaining until my old life evaporated completely. My heart hammered violently against my ribs. At precisely 9 a.m., my phone buzzed with a single vibration. It was a text from Julian. Green light. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the authorization code to my attorney, a shark named Keller whom Julian had recommended. The message was short. File immediately. With that digital handshake, the legal machinery roared to life. Somewhere in the city, a clerk stamped a document. The timestamp was the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted bitter. Like victory. Across town, Mark was likely settling into his ergonomic chair, feeling refreshed from his seminar. He would be checking emails, perhaps texting Elena about the Florida sun. He had no idea that a process server disguised as a courier was currently bypassing his receptionist. I imagined the scene with clarity. The knock on the glass door. The confusion. The heavy envelope landing on his desk. Public humiliation was a key part of the strategy. He had embarrassed me privately. I would embarrass him professionally. Julian's side of the operation was even more ruthless. Elena was hosting a charity brunch at her country club this morning. Julian had timed it perfectly. Two men in dark suits would approach her table just as the mimosas were poured. They wouldn't be discreet. They would hand her the papers in front of the very social circle she desperately tried to impress. It was cruel, perhaps, but necessary. They needed to be shocked into silence. If they were reeling, they couldn't coordinate a defense. My phone rang at 9:18 a.m. The screen flashed. Husband. I stared at it, watching the photo I had taken of us on our honeymoon vibrate against the counter. He called again immediately. Then a third time. Panic has a rhythm, and Mark was drumming it out. I didn't answer. Answering would give him an outlet for his anger. Silence would force him to sit with the consequences. I let it go to voicemail, listening to the house settle around me. The silence was now a weapon. A notification popped up. Voicemail received. I pressed play, putting it on speaker. Mark's voice filled the kitchen, high-pitched and breathless. Daisy. What is this? I am at work, and some guy just handed me. Daisy, pick up the phone? This has to be a mistake.
Call me back right now.
He sounded terrified. Not sorry. Terrified. He wasn't worried about losing me. He was worried about losing his image. I saved the recording. It would be an excellent exhibit for the negotiation phase. I opened my email to check the filing confirmation. My lawyer had attached the exhibits for my review. It was a masterpiece of documentation. Exhibit A, the GPS logs from the Eclipse Tower. Exhibit B10, the receipt for the white sectional sofa. Exhibit C, the high-resolution photos of them poolside at the Ritz-Carlton. There was no ambiguity. The photos showed them kissing, touching, living as husband and wife. It wasn't just a divorce petition. It was an indictment of his entire character. Simultaneously, the financial trap snapped shut. Julian had timed the filings to coincide with an immediate freeze on joint assets. Mark would try to use his credit card for lunch in about 2 hours, and it would decline. He would try to transfer funds to Elena, and the account would be locked. We were cutting off his supply lines. Without money, his arrogance would wither. He was about to learn that the lifestyle he enjoyed was subsidized by the woman he had betrayed. My secure line buzzed. It was Julian. It is done, he said, his voice as calm as a pilot landing a plane. Elena is hysterical. She just called me screaming about the prenup. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. And Mark? I asked. He's currently yelling at his HR director, trying to keep his job. It won't work. We didn't exchange congratulations. This wasn't a celebration. It was a demolition. We watched the dust clouds rise from the rubble of 2 marriages. I walked to the front door and engaged the new deadbolt I had installed yesterday. The locks were changed. His key would no longer turn. I packed a small bag. Not because I was leaving, but because I was staying elsewhere until the explosion settled. I wasn't running away. I was taking a tactical retreat to a hotel suite Julian had arranged. I looked back at the foyer one last time. The house was still standing. But the home was gone. I stepped out into the sunlight. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and expensive billable hours. I sat at the mahogany table, flanked by Keller. 2 weeks of silence had transformed Mark. He walked in wearing a wrinkled shirt, his eyes bloodshot, and darting around the room like a trapped animal. He didn't look like the man who sipped champagne at the Ritz. He looked like a man whose credit cards had been declined for 14 days straight. He slumped into the chair, refusing to meet my gaze or look at the damning evidence on the table. "Daisy, this is insanity," he started, his voice cracking with feigned exhaustion. "We don't need lawyers. We need a marriage counselor." He reached across the table, trying to bridge the gap with a familiar touch. I pulled my hand back as if he were radioactive. Keller cleared his throat, a sharp sound that cut through Mark's performance. "Mr. Whittaker, your infidelity is documented in 4K resolution," Keller said. "We are here to discuss division of assets, not reconciliation." Mark flinched, finally realizing the audience wasn't buying tickets. Mark straightened up, shifting tactics instantly. "You had me followed," he accused, pointing a shaking finger. "You invaded my privacy because you are paranoid. That trip was for work. Elena was just a colleague." It was a desperate lie. Crumbling even as he spoke it, I didn't raise my voice. I simply slid a photo across the smooth wood. It showed him buying lingerie at a boutique in Tampa. "Colleagues don't share fitting rooms, Mark," I said. "And they certainly don't charge lace to a joint account." The reality of his financial ruin seemed to hit him in waves. "You froze everything," he hissed. "I can't even pay my retainer. This is vindictive, Daisy." I looked at him with genuine curiosity. "It's not vindictive. It's procedural," I corrected him. "You spent $40,000 of marital funds on a condo for your mistress. The court is merely stopping the bleeding." He looked at his lawyer for help. But the man just shrugged, silently acknowledging the indefensible nature of the bank statements. "Elena is going through hell because of this," Mark muttered, trying to induce guilt. "Her husband, he's a monster. He left her with nothing." I exchanged a brief, imperceptible glance with Keller. "Julian Vance isn't a monster," I said, my voice cool. "He is a businessman who honors contracts." Elena broke hers. Mark froze. The mention of Julian's name, spoken with such familiarity, triggered a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He hadn't realized the two divorces were synchronized. The coincidence was finally looking suspicious to him. "How do you know him?" Mark asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. The air in the room grew thin. "Did you too plan this?" I didn't answer immediately. I let the question hang there, heavy and suffocating. "Julian and I share a similar appreciation for timing," I said enigmatically. "He provided the timeline. I provided the evidence. We both wanted the truth to be undeniable." Mark's face went pale. The realization that he was a pawn in a larger game shattered his remaining ego completely. Keller pushed the settlement agreement forward. It was a mercy kill. "You keep your 401k and your car," Keller outlined. "Daisy keeps the house, the investment accounts, and the dog. No alimony. You walk away today, or we go to trial and show the judge the intimate photos from the hotel." Mark looked at the papers, then at me. He saw no love, no hate, just a wall of indifference. He realized a trial would destroy his reputation permanently. He picked up the expensive pen. He signed with a shaky hand, surrendering the life he had built on lies. As we walked to the elevator, he tried one last time to hurt me. "You are cold, Daisy," he spat, pressing the down button. "I never knew you were this cold." I looked at his reflection in the polished metal doors. "I wasn't cold, Mark," I replied softly. "I was patient." "There is a difference." The doors opened, and he stepped into the void of his new, empty life. I didn't follow. My phone buzzed as I stepped out onto the busy street. It was Julian. "Elena signed," he confirmed. "She gets the condo lease and her jewelry. The company is safe." I felt a strange sense of camaraderie with this man I had only met a handful of times. We had successfully performed surgery on our lives, removing the cancer without killing the host. "Mark signed too," I typed back. "It's over." The 90-day siege had ended exactly as the spreadsheet predicted it would. I sat on a bench in the park across from the law firm, watching pigeons fight over crumbs. I checked my bank balance one last time. The $100 million sat there, quiet and potent. It wasn't just money anymore. It was a monument to the discipline I never knew I had. Mark thought he had lost a wife. In reality, he had lost a negotiation against a woman backed by 9 figures of leverage. I closed my eyes and finally, truly exhaled. 6 months later, the sunlight in my new apartment felt different. It was unfiltered, bouncing off clean white walls that held no memories of arguments or betrayal. I stood on the balcony overlooking the lake, holding a mug of tea that didn't taste like anxiety anymore. The settlement check had cleared long ago, but the Vance Trust deposit remained untouched in the offshore account. It was a ghost fund, a silent guardian. I wasn't just a wealthy divorcee. I was a fortress disguised as a woman. Julian asked to meet one last time at the same café where it started. The smell of burnt espresso triggered a phantom ache in my chest, but it faded quickly. He looked lighter too. His shoulders dropped an inch. "The merger went through," he said, placing a small velvet box on the table. "It wasn't a ring. It was a key. A token," he added, "to a partner who held the line. We didn't hug. We didn't promise to keep in touch. We simply nodded." He walked out into the rain, disappearing into a black sedan without looking back. I fingered the heavy brass key he left behind. It unlocked a private vault in Zurich. A permanent safety net. I slipped it into my pocket, feeling its cold weight against my thigh. People talk about closure like it's a conversation. It isn't. Closure is the moment you realize you no longer need to check the rearview mirror. I ordered a second coffee, simply because I could. A mutual friend told me Mark was living in a studio apartment in the suburbs. Apparently, Alina left him when the credit cards stopped working. The news should have sparked joy or pity, but I felt nothing. It was like hearing a weather report for a country I never planned to visit again. He was a character in a book I had finished reading. The anger that had fueled me for 90 days had evaporated, leaving behind a clean, empty space. I wasn't defined by his failure anymore. I walked home through the park, watching couples hold hands on the benches. Once, I believed that love was about noise. Grand declarations and loud arguments. I thought silence meant something was broken. I was wrong. Silence is where the real power lies. It is the pause before the strike, the breath before the decision. Julian taught me that patience is a weapon, but I was the one who learned how to wield it. The woman who begged for attention was gone. In her place stood someone who commanded absolute respect. I unlocked the door to my sanctuary, the tumblers clicking with a satisfying sound. The evening light cast long shadows across the floor, but I didn't turn on the lamps. I liked the twilight. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. The ice in my eyes had melted into clear, calm water. I didn't need a husband to feel safe. I didn't need a savior to feel whole. I had 100 million reasons to be confident, but the most important one was free. I was finally, beautifully, untethered.